and welcome to Lunchtime Politics on Channels Television. I'm Coyote Kikilu here in Lagos. But let's bring you the biggest political stories making the rounds at this hour. President Tinubu asks state governors to control their local governments as he denies any plans to take away the councils away from the governors. Question is this back to square one? We find out. 2023 presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, says there's no merger deal with the NNPP or the PDP just yet, but asks all lovers of Nigeria to come together. It looks like 2025 will be yet another interesting one as organized labor is set to push for a review of a minimum wage this year, as it asks government at all levels to obey last year's 70,000 Naira Minimum Wage Act. Well, let's get right into it. President Bola Tinubu has emphasized the critical role of state governors in driving Nigeria's development and prosperity, saying their leadership at the subnational level is central to achieving food security, economic prosperity, and rapid national growth. Speaking while receiving members of the Nigeria Governors Forum at his Ikoyi residence, the president expressed his gratitude for their support and collaboration while highlighting key areas requiring joint effort for the nation's progress. The president also met with the leadership of the National Assembly. Our State House correspondent Larry Lasisi reports.
The leadership of the Senate arrived in the Ikoyi residence of President Bola Tinubu.
Happy New Year, sir.
They're here to pay New Year homage to the president. They're joined by the leadership of the House of Representatives and former presiding officers.
Happy New Year, sir.
They're received by the president in company of Vice President Kashim Shettima. The leadership of the National Assembly pledged their support to the president.
This journey of prosperity for Nigeria, this journey of reforming Nigeria, in all aspects, you are not alone. The National Assembly is with you. We will stand by you to ensure that we don't do the same thing over and expect a different result.
I want to appreciate you, Mr. President, for bringing more Soko to the poor. Nigerians, at the beginning of the year, had more challenges in life. But as the year started coming to an end, more Soko, more food, more prosperity has started pouring in.
The president commended them for their commitment to the nation.
A transformative journey that we embark on is all our journey, not for us, it's for our tomorrow. It's for the future generations. Your commitment will yield that fruit. We bring the result to the babies yet unborn.
The president also met with a delegation from the Nigerian Governors Forum. The forum's chairman commended the president's economic policies.
I have not done 2 years in this administration, but I've done more projects in my less than 2 years and in the 4 years of my first term. And that is due to the structural adjustment program you're doing. Restructuring the economy means that we're getting more funding. Yes, there's inflation, but what we're getting overrides the inflation and we're delivering a lot.
The president called for stronger collaboration between the federal and state governments to address pressing challenges in the country.
There was some gossip that maybe we had a disagreement or quarrel and everything when it was local government's autonomy. No. Just drive the development down there to the local government authorities. Nobody wants to take the control away from you. But collaboration, let's do it together and make sure Nigeria is better off from it.
The president expressed confidence in Nigeria's capacity to thrive and gave his commitment to work harder for the country. Larry Lasisi, Channels Television News.
Well, on the flip side, the organized labor says it is pushing for an annual increase to the 70,000 naira minimum wage paid to workers in Nigeria. First, the president of the NLC, Mr. Joe Ajero, released a statement yesterday, and he not only asked governments at all levels to comply with the provisions of the 2024 National Minimum Wage Act, but added that given the economic realities imposed by recent government policies, the unions will engage the government for a wage review to safeguard workers' welfare. Similarly, the president of the Trade Union Congress, TUC, Mr. Festus Osifo, said members of the organization as well as their colleagues at the NLC have begun talks in this regard to reflect the level of inflation. He was a guest on our political show.
What we are pushing for from Labour is that instead of you to wait for 5 years to increase minimum wage, you will now look at the inflation of the last 5 years and try to do some adjustment. Why can't we be reflecting the inflation on an annual basis, for example? So we have entered January 2025. So by 15th of January 2025, the National Bureau of Statistics is going to release the inflation figure for December. So what we are pushing for as Labour is that if, for example, the inflation figure is 35%, apply that 35% on the 70,000 naira minimum wage. So that it will become reflective of what the true value is. Then when we get to 2026, you will also do similar application. So that is actually where what we are pushing. We shouldn't be waiting for 5 years, but in the new act now, 3 years for us to do those adjustments. We could be doing them systemically by applying the inflation as of December the preceding year to what the minimum wage is. So this is part of the position that we are also going to canvass this year that we have entered now. We started the conversation last year, but we will continue it, in 2025.
Well, it looks like the stage is set for what could be an interesting year. The federal government, states and local governments having their conversation, and Labour, of course, with its own demand. So let's talk about what the political, more importantly, the economic climate would look like in this year. We're joined by Mr. Marcel Okeke, who's a political economist, joins us virtually, as well as Mr. Idris Shaibu, an economist named CEO, Timeline Consult Limited. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Lunchtime Politics, and let me say Happy New Year to you. I'll begin with you, Mr. I'll begin with you, Mr. Okeke. It's quite interesting seeing the conversations happening in the different, segments. The government, for example, the president speaking to governors saying, "We don't want to take local governments from you, okay? Control your local governments. Deliver dividends of democracy." Some might say, is that a U-turn? I thought we wanted to have autonomy for local governments. On the flip side, you have Labour saying, well, all of that conversation really, yes, you can have them, but what matters to us right now is welfare for workers, and we're pushing for a negotiation of minimum wage, 70,000 naira already, and it looks like we're going to be having yet another round of wage negotiation. So when you look at all these issues and the others that I've not talked about, what does the economic climate for 2025 look like for you?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this program. The economic climate for next year, for this year, 2025, for me is cloudy, looking at it. And from what you have said, from the standpoint of Labour, you can see that it's yet unclear as to how things will, work out, because Labour is proposing going to some kind of negotiation with the federal government, okay? And what they are saying now is the negotiation has to take place now, so that whatever agreement they reach with the government, the implementation will commence this January, when in fact, what they are now proposing was not what they agreed with the government last year. They had they agreed on a time span of 3 years for wages and the salaries to be, adjusted and all that. But now, seeing what the inflation is doing to the economy, they want that to be done now. That's on their own part. Then, when you look at the inflation we are even talking about, see that inflation keeps going on and up. Like the president of, the Congress mentioned there, he's talking about the inflation ending at around 35% by the close of December when Bureau of Statistics releases their results. So that shows that the purchasing power of Nigerians, keeps deteriorating, and that translates into significant drop in the quality of life. Because rise in inflation implies, prices of things keep going sky high, and so on and so forth. So when that is the situation, and you have a salary that is static, and you have income that is static, then you can gauge the implication, for the people, for Nigerians, for the polity,
Right. After all, the governors said that they're getting more money, and I imagine that Labour is also listening and saying, okay, if you're getting more money, you should be able to give the workers some more money. But let me bring in Mr. Shaibu Idris on this one as well. Listening to the conversations happening, listening to Mr. Marcelo Keke's viewpoint. So is this the year that at least workers also get another increase? We'll come to other things, but I wanted to get this out of the way. Does 2025 look like it can accommodate yet another negotiation for higher minimum wage, which will, of course, trickle down?
Good afternoon and happy new year to all of us. Thank you for having me. I think this new year is likely going to witness a number of fundamental, issues that could affect both the economy and the political landscape. Clearly, Labour did not appear to have been as pragmatic as they should have been when they were negotiating with the federal government on the minimum wage. Eventually, they did agree at 70,000 naira as minimum wage, but even before the minimum wage, was implemented, that figure, the arithmetic became nonsense of the figure. By the time you look at where inflation is in Nigeria, the cost of living crisis that we are witnessing, clearly, there has to be a bit of a renegotiation, a kind of, not necessarily a renegotiation, maybe a continuum and reopening of the earlier on negotiation so that we don't call it a renegotiation. And possibly also for government and indeed the organized private sector to agree to some of our recommendations from the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management that, wait a minute, should we even be having continuously from every now and then negotiation of minimum wage? Why don't we index and benchmark minimum wage with inflation? As inflation inches up, you automatically adjust. So there will be a seemingly no lead time or lag time when, these issues could need to be discussed. Every now and then there is always a little bit of rancor between organized labor and, let's say, the government in trying to fix minimum wage. Shouldn't we even do away with this minimum wage? Why should there even be concept of minimum wage when we are not talking of living wage? Today, a bag of rice is how much? You need to buy virtually everything. Water, you need to get water for your house. Electricity, you need to provide for security for yourself. You need to, even third road in some communities, you have to provide. Yet, we pay taxes, particularly those of us who are still laborers and earning salary and compelled to pay taxes, and yet you don't get nothing, and you keep saying minimum wage, minimum wage. This minimum wage is hardly a take-home wage.
All right. Interesting you put it that way. So now that we've talked about wages, which is quite vital to the survival of workers or anyone at that, let's then move to other indices that will play a major role this year. And I'll go back to Mr. Okeke on this one. So inflation, you've mentioned that. Mr. Idris Shaibu has also mentioned that the president is not only ambitious with the target for the inflation. Some say it's just even more than ambition is way more than that. Even targeting 15% when we're at over 30%. So some say let's target 27, maybe 28. Maybe that's more feasible. So we'll look at inflation figures. What must we get it to? There's oil production as well. We can't control at least the price of a barrel, but we can control our production to a large extent. And that is vital to the survival of our economy, or budget, I should say. There's also energy cost for the average Nigerian. The price of petrol right now are just below 1,000 naira. What must we get it to if we must give the people a better life? There's also the unit cost of power. We can talk about the dollar to naira as well. So when you look at these indices, I mean, you look at the numbers, what would you have them be and what must be done to get them there, Mr. Okeke?
Okay, thank you. We know where we started this journey, down the slope, so to speak. The way a manner fuel subsidy, was removed, triggered all that brought us to where we are today. On the 29th of May, 2023, when the president pronounced that the fuel subsidy was gone, and a few minutes, just hours, the price of PMS, for instance, premium motor spirit, moved from below 200 naira per liter to 700 or thereabout. And like you mentioned, as we speak now, it's still hovering around 1,000 naira per liter. So you can see such a rapid, rise in the price of PMS, using that one alone. And that has fed into the prices of goods and services in the country. And that essentially drove up, the inflation we are talking about from around 22%, as at that time, to almost 35% that we have now. Okay, so what do? We have to go back to fuel subsidy removal. What were we supposed to put in place or to have put in place since that removal? The point is that we now have to think of how to have local refining, as opposed to almost 100% importation of PMS. For the government to have gone ahead and kept licensing more importers of PMS, that had a lot of negative multiplier effect, if you like, because the continued importation of PMS amounted to, demand pressure on the FX market, where these importers must get dollars for them to keep importing. And if you look at it, figures will show you that maybe 1/3 or a quarter of the available dollar in the FX market has been going to importation of refined product over the years. You understand? So it is important, very, very critical now, that we have local refineries, and as much as possible, reduce or, in fact, stop the importation of PMS. If you stop it and you have all these things working locally, we'll save ourselves the trouble in which we find ourselves now. And that now reminds us of the issue of what the Dangote refinery, went through. The brouhaha, that went around it when it wanted to go on stream, is not something, that commends government in that regard. There were a lot of what looked like propaganda, something that looked like sabotage and all that. Thank God Dangote has gone on stream. It also points to the fact that government has to do everything possible, everything possible, to restream, its own 4 refineries in the various parts of the country. The Port Harcourt refinery, all these controversies about them should be stopped so that they effectively take off. The Port Harcourt refinery, Warri refinery, Kaduna refinery, and so on and so forth. If they now take off effectively and get a local supply of crude oil, I believe that the price of PMS, for instance, will be coming down consistently, even if gradually. And that's what everybody is expecting. So you start reversing, the negative effect or negative impact of fuel subsidy withdrawal. That's on that one. On the other hand, government has to start effective diversification of the economy so that the much needed effects we are talking about will not only be coming essentially from crude oil export. Okay, over the years, it has been just a sing-song. Diversification became a mantra, kind of, to various administrations. This is the time to effectively diversify the economy so that in addition to what is coming out from crude oil export, since the government is telling us that it's likely to increase crude oil production to over 2 million barrels per day, we want that to happen. And then if that happens, it also means that our export volume is likely to go up because OPEC is likely to increase our export quota. And then doing that, and you diversify the economy, it also means that we now be getting more effects from other sources. And when you put it together, that's what this economy needs, because our economy has been largely an import-dependent economy. So where is the effects to spend to do this importation? You know, so government has to be deliberate as to how it now diversifies the economy.
Let me just take one more response from Mr. Shaibu, and this concerns the president's proposal to have this national credit guarantee company to sort of expand risk-sharing instruments for financial institutions and enterprises. There was an announcement he made yesterday in his New Year message. He also talked about some other things, but this concerns, I imagine, the well-being of Nigerians, the survival of the average Nigerian. Some of them do not have access to credit in the first place. They don't even get, wages to be able to get access to, credit to either do business or just sort some of the basic things of life. I don't know if you think this is a game changer. Some have said that we need to first fix production. Let's fix production in the country. In fact, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party said, let's fix production, ensure that we're very productive as a nation. Then we can begin to talk about some of these things like taxes and the rest, but more importantly, fix production. So how do you think this aligns with the needs and yearnings of Nigerians? Mr. Shoaib.
Thank you. Before I answer that question, let me just tangentially touch about this issue of inflation to be brought to 15%. I like to be a little cynical in the sense that the last time I checked, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was never a magician, no, is he a babalao? So it's practically impossible. Like we say in certain parlance, this is impossible. It's impossible plus cannot happen. Economic policies never take place, just split of hands. You can't sit down, inflation is somewhere at 35, 40%, and you say by the end of the year it should be, you hope to bring it down to 15%. As far as I'm concerned, is a near impossible, objective to achieve. Back to the question of the, risk-sharing scheme. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's timely. If you look at what we have today, we have had the Nigerian Incentive Risk-Based Sharing Scheme, that is the NIRSAL, that is handling, targeted to agri sector alone, and which was managed by, which is being managed by the central bank. If we have a national risk guarantee sharing, mechanism, it will help reduce the kind of challenges that we have been having within the Nigerian banking environment. Remember, banks and bankers are exposed to enormous amount of risk, just as insurance. Now, when you look at what is happening in the insurance industry, you have the general insurance, the life insurance business, and the composite. Both of them, they reinsure, their risk using the reinsurance window. And even the reinsurance, companies also further go a little international. Some of them use the Lloyd's guarantee insurance sharing, risk sharing mechanism. So within the realm of financial intermediation or financial industry, you realize that insurance businesses already have a risk sharing arrangement, but the banking environment does not have that risk sharing opportunity. So I believe President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's thought process as regards this is quite laudable. Now, one may ask, Is it the right time to introduce it? Maybe should it be later? Maybe we should look at production. I do agree we should look at production, but hey, wait a minute. If you don't lend to the productive sector of the economy, can production be enhanced?
Happen in the first place.
And
Right.
if you have the charger,
Pardon me, just to
have
reiterate that point you were making because of time, it's a very interesting mix that we have right now. Some you say is just outright impossible, but we have about 12 months, and I imagine I will have this conversation in the coming months and probably at the end of the year to review some of these issues. But we have to thank you so much. We've been speaking with Mr. Shaibu Idris, who's an economist and MD CEO Timeline Consult Limited, as well as Mr. Marcel Okeke, political economist. Good to see you again, and thank you so much for your contributions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So the coming days will tell. But in the meantime, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, has been speaking. In fact, spoke hours ago where he said, on the one hand, that there's no merger deal yet with any party, either the People's Democratic Party, PDP, the New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, or any other party at that just yet. The former Anambra State governor stated this earlier this morning when he held a press conference at the nation's capital, Abuja, on the state of the nation. Well, he added that no agreement has been established with the parties, but rallied all lovers of Nigeria in the political space to come together in 2027 and defeat the APC, which are accused of mismanaging the country's resources. He also described the security situation in the country as unfortunate, saying Nigerians die needlessly due to banditry, terrorism, and kidnapping for ransom. He then put a challenge to the president to lead by reducing the cost of governance. Now let's talk security now. As part of efforts to enhance the welfare of officers and soldiers of the Nigerian Army, over 10 projects have been commissioned at the 192 Battalion Rear Owode-Yewa, Ogun State. Now, while commissioning the project, the General Officer commanding the 81 Division, Major General Farouk Mijiyana, asked soldiers and their families to imbibe a good maintenance culture.
The main entrance of the 192 Battalion Rear Owode-Yewa is wearing a new look. It's one of several projects set for commissioning within the battalion. The General Officer commanding 81 Division, General Farouk Mijiyana, is here. First on his list is the interaction with wives of soldiers, where he spoke on peaceful coexistence and constant support to their spouses.
Are you good to go? Good to go!
He gives a clear directive to officers and men on professionalism.
I want you to continue working with this high morale. Is that clear?
Yes, sir!
Work with other security agencies and also to maintain the high level of professionalism and discipline. Am I clear?
Yes, sir!
This year, as a gift, we have done all very well. Now, going forward, as we enter 2025, by next year, I want us all to double our efforts so that we ensure peace and security in the whole of our area of responsibility.
Commissioning the housings, solar-powered water project,
on behalf of the Chief Army Staff, Lieutenant General Oluede,
and the newly rehabilitated roads within the barracks, Major General Mijiyana adds that the projects will alleviate the well-being of all within the barrack community.
The projects were approved by Army Headquarters. It consists of 8 by family, corporal and below quarters. This accommodation is expected to accommodate 96 soldiers and their families. At the same time, I also commissioned the newly drilled solar-powered borehole, which has almost 500 liters capacity. These projects were approved by Army Headquarters, and they are all under the command philosophy of the Chief Army Staff, in particular the welfare strand, which is aimed at improving the welfare of officers, soldiers, and their families. Commissioned this newly constructed 192 Battalion main gate
He rounded off with the commissioning of the battalion signage, the newly remodeled quarter guard, fire assemble point, and the unveiling of the newly named streets.
The GOC 81 Division Major General Farouk Mijiyawa speaking there. Well, that's the program for this afternoon. Thank you for watching. I'm Coyote Kikilu, Silver Channels Television. Follow the breaking news. Goodbye.